right, here we go. Great.
And I can rename you a silly name right now. That's another option I have.
Go for it.
I think your students would like that a lot.
All right, so I'm going to go ahead and see. Okay, yeah, we've got a lot of kids here now. Let's see, 3, 6, 9, 10, 11. So you guys, in about 1 minute, we'll get everybody here, and I'll do a brief introduction, and we'll get started with today. Okay. 3, 6. To my class, you guys, if you would have a piece of paper and a pencil handy, certainly you're responsible for anything that you hear today. Just jot down some notes. I'm recording the class, so if we need to look at it again, we can, but just so we're all clear on that, I would like you really paying attention and being attentive. Feel free to ask questions. I'm sure that you'll get the opportunity today. But David, if you don't see anybody else right now, we're definitely missing some kids here. I might work on getting them here, but 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9.
And Eric, I can transfer the host function back to you.
Okay. Yeah.
Since I don't have any slides or anything.
Okay, that's cool. Go ahead and do it.
Okay. You're now the host.
Great. Okay. All right. So we'll go ahead and get started. You guys, I'd like to introduce one of my good friends, David Smith, who is the superintendent of Joshua Tree National Park, and he has brought with him one of his friends, James. I missed your last name, but James, could you remind us of your position at the park?
Hi, sure. Good morning. My name is James Bachknight, the common spelling, Bachknight. And I'm a maintenance person here at Joshua Tree National Park. My job in particular, I'm in charge of the trail program. So I maintain the 230 miles of trails we have in the park.
Okay, so again, David Smith is the superintendent of the park, and then James is here to talk about some stuff too. I really appreciate all my students being here and being attentive and giving these two guys your full attention for the next 30 minutes or so. And I'll turn things over to David, who was a very close friend of our family here in Lawrence, Kansas. Particularly, we met these guys through soccer. Our kids played in the same club soccer program, and we became friends. He lived in Old West Lawrence, by kind of in the neighborhood where I live, and at the time was the superintendent of Brown v. Board of Education in Topeka, and then was promoted and is now at Joshua Tree. So I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to David to talk, and thanks again for being here, both of you guys.
We're honored to be here, and it's really great to see you guys. It's great to see kids right now. I don't see a lot of kids at the park. I see a bunch of middle-aged people that are fleeing Los Angeles. I don't see any foreigners or kids anymore, so it's great to see you guys out there. Eric has big dreams for this class and what he's going to be doing with you during the course of this semester, which is super exciting. I wish that I was going to Bishop Seabury right now so I could actually be with you. I think the biking and hiking and everything you're going to be doing is just fantastic. I'm going to be talking a little bit about careers in the federal government and becoming a ranger or something like that. I'm going to be talking about wilderness and what that actually means from a federal context, and also what wilderness means to you all. And so I will be calling on you to give me an idea of what you think wilderness is. So you are not allowed to go to sleep. Brenner, if you've disappeared from the camera, I can't see your head if you are sleeping, man. Okay, there's the head. Okay, just wanted to make sure. No, I'm being silly. I'm not going to really get too deep into it, but I will call you out. So let me just give you a little bit of background about why am I even here. I was just like you guys. A lot of you probably have not spent a lot of time hiking in national parks or camping in them or going to Forest Service sites or BLM sites. You probably don't know what BLM is. You think it's Black Lives Matter, and yet to Jamie and me, it's the Bureau of Land Management. I didn't know what these places were until I became a park ranger. And I became a park ranger when my future spouse and I took 4 months off after college, and we camped all around the United States. We got into our truck and we got our dog and got some bikes, and we camped all around the United States. And I discovered that the happiest people in the United States were park rangers. And that really changed my focus. My degree, I went to UC Berkeley in California. My degree was in forestry. I was trained to cut down trees, but there weren't a lot of trees to cut down at the time. And I realized that I didn't really want to cut down trees. I wanted to be happy, and park rangers were happy. So I became a park ranger. And that was 30 years ago that I started with the National Park Service. And I started working in Colorado at Dinosaur National Monument. Super cool place. You know, I want you to imagine you were like 24, you get to Dinosaur, you're supposed to be a naturalist, and they're not nudists, you know, that's one kind of naturalist, but naturalists in the Park Service parlance are people that talk a lot and they educate people. So I was a naturalist there, and I was going to talk about dinosaurs. Man, I don't know jack about dinosaurs. You know, my degree was in French and poli-sci and in forestry, and here I am talking about dinosaurs. So I spent 2 summers with groups of like 300, you know, happy American visitors talking about dinosaurs, and I was hooked. I'm like, man, this is cool. I can get into this. And then I went to a law enforcement academy up near San Francisco, and I got my commission so I could actually do law enforcement in the National Park Service. And I did that for about 5 years. And I worked in Utah at Canyonlands National Park. I worked at Arches. I did a gig down in San Diego at a park that is incredibly small, called Cabrillo. And then I got more back into interpretation, and I became the district naturalist at Grand Canyon. So I was responsible for the south side of the Grand Canyon and all the kind of talking rangers that were there. And my spouse, my husband, he got the job as the district ranger, which was super cool because he got to hang from the bottom of a helicopter. He was a paramedic. He managed the river program. He did all the emergency medical stuff. And then he gave out a lot of tickets as well. So he had a blast. I never got a chance to hang from the bottom of a helicopter. And then I went and did a really crazy thing. I got assigned to Congress for 2 years. Congress has 2 park rangers, one that works for the House of Representatives and one that works for the Senate. And I worked for the House for 2 years, and I learned how to write legislation and how to put together public meetings and how to get laws passed. And then I moved to Kansas, which I was like thinking at the time, I was like, Kansas, oh my God, why are we going to Kansas? No one wants to go to Kansas. And then I got there and I realized, my God, this is the best place in the entire world. That's why no one wants to go to Kansas. It's a secret. And so I got a chance to live in Lawrence, and I got a chance to work in Topeka at a really small site. And Kansas opened my eyes about wilderness. And so there is a method to my madness here. I just went on a diatribe for 5 minutes, but there's a method. I had spent my entire life, for the most part, out in the West. When I was a boy growing up and I wanted to go dune buggy riding, you know, we went out to the deserts of California or the deserts of Nevada. When I was in college and wanted to go hiking, I could go anywhere. I go to Nevada, I go to Montana, because almost all the land was public land. You know, if you were outside of a city boundary, you're probably in a national forest, or you were on BLM land, or maybe you made it to a national park. But when we got to Kansas, I'm like, yeah, I can't wait to start really camping and exploring Kansas. Kansas has virtually no public land. You know, of all of our states and all of our territories across the United States, Kansas has the least amount of public land of any state. And I will pose this question to you. You know, why does Kansas have so little public land compared to the rest of the country? So, Sophia, I'm going to put you on the spot right now. Sophia, what do you think? Why do you think Kansas has so little public land? And you're going to have to unmute yourself before you talk, because that's a mistake I've made many times before. So why do you think Kansas has so little in the way of public land?
I mean, most of the places that are populated in public are just little tiny towns, and then I guess there's a lot of just farm area, which is private.
Good point. There's a lot of farm area, and that ties into this thought right here. So, okay, so that was Sophia's idea. Braden, I'm putting you on the spot now, man. Can you do her one better? Why do you think Kansas has so little public land?
Well, if I'm being quite honest, there isn't too much to appreciate in Kansas, you know.
Ouch. What a thing to say. Oh my gosh. Governor Brownback would not agree with you, but.
Well, I mean, if I'm being quite honest, you know, in Colorado, you know, there's actually like lands you really want to hike on. And in Kansas, all we have is like the river and all we have is like, you know, ranch land and privately owned land because
hey, so you said something really important there. You said privately owned land. Why is there so much privately owned land in Kansas? Well, Kansas, as you guys know from the history of it, you know, it was opened up for homesteading, you know, and as a result, Kansas is full of really, really good arable land. And everyone knows what the term arable means. Arable is a place where you can grow crops on. You know, it is awesome land, man. You put a plow in that ground and things just pop up. You know, you go to a lot of the western states, there's very little, well, there's not a lot of arable land. You know, a place like Nevada. Why is Nevada 90% public land? Because no one wants it. You can't grow anything there. You can't really raise cattle in a lot of areas there. Same is true for Western Colorado. You've got the Rocky Mountains. How are you going to have a farm in the Rocky Mountains? You know, it just doesn't work that well. So as a result, there's very little in the way of public land in Kansas, and there's very little in the way of wilderness as well. So when you're looking for an experience, a wilderness experience in Kansas, you know, where do you go? You know, what is a place you could do? Evan McHenry, tell me, when you're looking for a wilderness experience in Kansas, what do you imagine? What do you do? Where do you go?
Like the Kansas River is pretty good. Like you can paddle it or go to sandbars and stuff.
Very good. Okay, so the Kansas River goes from through Manhattan, it goes through Topeka, it goes through Lawrence, you know, it goes all the way to KC. Man, that's certainly not my idea of wilderness experiences, but maybe for you, Evan, that is a wilderness experience. Would you say that when you're out there on a sandbar in the middle of the Kaw, that is a wilderness experience for you?
I mean, that's about as close as I can feel to like being away from civilization in Kansas. Because when you're out in the country, you know, you're only so far from like a country road or a farm or something.
Excellent. Well put. So Regan Bible, tell me, when you think of a place that you can go in the state that is going to give you a wilderness experience, where do you go? What do you think about?
Well, the first thing I thought about was the Kansas River, but like for another one, I'm actually not really sure. Like, I mean, I guess my family has like a lot of land out in western Kansas, so we go out there quite a bit, but.
So that's private property that you're going to have a wilderness experience on, which is
yeah,
pretty,
I wouldn't like
crazy.
consider it most wilderness experience, but yeah.
So I'm talking to Eric Nelson before you guys get in this, you know, got into the classroom today, and he was telling me about, yeah, you know, we've been developing this trail system on our family's property in Lawrence, and you know, we really get out there in the wilderness and the country. Well, that probably does not meet the congressional designation of what wilderness actually is, which, you know, is an area that has been untrammeled, which means it has not been manipulated by man. Where there's no artifacts of humankind in those areas other than prehistoric artifacts, and where you can go to have these experiences that are not going to be intruded upon by human artifacts. And there's very few of those places in Kansas because everything's farmland, or, you know, you've got development in these areas. You know, I was hoping one of you might have said the Flint Hills. You know, the Flint Hills, you know, really struggled, you know, to preserve those areas as a place where Kansans can go and actually have a wilderness type experience. So I am the park manager. I am the park superintendent at Joshua Tree National Park. This park gets 3 million visitors a year. That is everyone in Kansas every year going to Joshua Tree. It is a very popular spot. We are within a couple hours of LA and San Diego, and about 3 hours of Vegas. And this is a place where you come to go rock climbing, you come to go hiking on the backcountry trails inside the park, you come to see the night skies. It's a place that's super, super popular. But about Jamie, tell me if I'm wrong, 80% of our land is wilderness, or is it more now? 80%. Jamie's putting his head up and down, 80%.
Yeah,
So 80%. Okay, so 80% of the property here inside the park is wilderness. What does that mean? Jamie, you are head of our wilderness committee inside the park. You build trails throughout the area. When you think of wilderness from your perspective, what does that mean to you?
That's a good question. Wilderness is really important, I think, just fundamentally for us as humans. I think that, one of the most formative experiences I had as a young man was when I grew up in South Carolina, a place that also does not have a lot of national parks, a lot of public land. But we do have a place just in North Carolina, Smoky Mountain National Park. And when I was in my early 20s, I went for a week on a backpacking trip up in the Smoky Mountains with some friends of mine. And that was my first experience with wilderness. And I'll say, it was really transformative. I mean, being in a place for a week where I really didn't see anybody. All you see are the trees and the mountains. So you get up in the morning and you smell the fresh air, and you don't hear traffic. You don't hear your neighbor's TV going. That is, it's something that is so rare these days. Sometimes it feels like, and it's something that we as humans kind of thrive on. I think. I mean, me personally, it's something that kind of builds us up again on a more spiritual level, I guess, if I can use that word. So, and there were some real visionary folks back in, I want to say, the 1960s. The Wilderness Act legislation was passed in 1969. And they really took that kind of intangible idea of wilderness and formed legislation and kind of tried to put those really difficult to describe ideas down on paper. And what were those aspects of wilderness that were important? Well, first of all, it has to be natural. There has to be something there of nature for us to connect with, and then it has to be undeveloped. It's not wilderness if there's a big housing development or a huge radio tower in the middle. That's not wilderness. And there's a few others, but I will say that one thing that they recognized in the legislation was that wilderness is not only for the natural environment for our plants and animals that thrive in those areas, but it's also for humans. It's a place for us to go and seek like unconfined recreation and solitude to help kind of clear our head and reconnect to nature. And so, wilderness, I feel really lucky to work for the Park Service because I've been able to experience wilderness in a lot of different national parks. I think Joshua Tree is the 7th national park I've worked at. It's a responsibility that the agency takes very seriously. We try very hard to obviously respect the law, but also, to provide those experiences for people to have like that unconfined recreational experience so they can reconnect and recharge your batteries.
Jamie, that is perfect. No, you're not rambling. You're the most it's like Shakespeare every time you open your mouth, Jamie. So so for those of you who are going to go on and do literature majors or psych majors or something, or philosophy majors in college, you might become trail foremen. They are the most artistic, crazy dudes in the Park Service because they've got to craft these crazy trails, going through these areas and doing it with an artistic flair. And that's something that Jamie does. So thanks so much for sharing where you're coming from. So he was saying, an unconfined experience, somewhere. Now you guys live in a city, and I'm gonna call on someone right now, Lyle Griggs. You're on the spot, man, now, Lyle. So when you think of an unconfined experience out in a natural area, what would that be for you?
Uh, my experience in wilderness areas, I've been to Joshua Tree. It's like that.
Excellent. Okay, so what did you do at Joshua Tree though that allowed you to have that unconfined experience?
Well, I was probably, I think I was 10, maybe 11. So I didn't go out on trails very far, but there's so little out there in terms of like structures and roads that you don't have to get very, deep into the park to feel like you're in the middle of nowhere. So there are enough boulders at that. I don't remember what trail I hiked, but you like, as long as the parking lot's hidden by a couple boulders, you feel like you're in the middle of nowhere. So
excellent observations. Very, very cool. So Audrey, when you think of recreating in a wilderness area, what would that be to you? What kind of things would you be doing in a wilderness area? And yeah, thank you for unmuting yourself.
My friends and I, sometimes in spring break, we go out to like western Kansas past the Flint Hills, and we go to like those rock parks. So like there's really nothing going on there. We just kind of picnic out there, or we just hang.
But Audrey, how do you survive without Wi-Fi? How do you, your generation out there, your 16, 17, 18-year-olds, because wilderness areas probably don't have a cell tower. Are you still able to find some way to recreate in those areas?
Yeah, I think it's really nice to just be surrounded by that, and you're not like obligated to respond to like constant messaging, which is kind of what happens when you have Wi-Fi on. And you kind of just enjoy like the sun and the breeze and like lying on a really tall rock that took you a while to get up because I'm short.
Excellent observation. Thank you for sharing that experience. I hope this isn't too stressful, me calling on all of you. It's just it's a trick that teachers use sometimes to make sure that you have not fallen asleep. So that's all. So I have babbled on for a bit, and Jamie has babbled on as well. Eric had mentioned that you guys had some questions. So this was just a little bit of an introduction, just a little taste into what it means to manage a national park. The career route that I took to get here. And I didn't talk so much about Jamie, but he had a similar route to the one that I did as well. Went to college and then went on and started working inside of national parks. But a lot of kids have different routes, and I'm hoping later this semester we can talk about internship possibilities for you. Summer hiring authorities that we have for youth, and Jamie hires a lot of summer youth to do trail programs inside the park, which sounds crazy in the summer at Joshua Tree, but somehow he makes it work. And some other ways that you can get into public land, because I got to tell you, this has been an amazing career. I totally love it, and it is a very satisfying career route. At least it's been for me. So Eric, if you're cool with this, I can keep on talking about some other issues, or we can open it up for questions.
I think you can open it up and see what questions kids have, and then we can move on to something else if they don't have any. But have at it, guys. Go ahead and unmute yourself if you'd like to ask a question.
I have one. I can go. Unless, sure.
No, please go.
Okay. So I know you originally started managing Brown v. Board, and moving from Brown v. Board to Joshua Tree, that's a pretty big difference in size. And so my main question, Joshua Tree is a lot more dangerous than Brown v. Board. What's it like dealing with injuries, deaths, stuff like that on a park that big and that, nearly inhospitable in places?
Wow, it's a huge responsibility, Lyle, to manage a park and know that people's lives, can be impacted by your decisions. So my number one concern is taking care of the men and women that work here. And I'm really, especially in the time of COVID, all these decisions I'm making, like, can they safely do this? Would I be willing to work a visitor center counter? Would I be willing to make a car stop right now and potentially arrest someone for DUI? Would I be willing to treat a patient who's fallen off the rock? And I think we've mitigated most of the dangers that are out there with masks and plexiglass and all that other stuff. But last week we had a visitor die inside the park. His vehicle got stuck on a dirt road. He had a street vehicle, just a 2-wheel drive Nissan, and he went down a 4-wheel drive only sandy road, and it was 115 degrees, and he died on top of a sand piece right there. Wow. That is just awful. I had 2 rangers that were down giving him CPR for 30 minutes until a medical control declared that he was dead. That happens a few times a year, and I was like, wow, what is my responsibility as a manager? That didn't happen in Kansas. Kansas, someone would slip in the parking lot and I'd have to run and get some Band-Aids, and that would be the most exciting thing that happened all year. Here I've got folks that fall off of rocks. I have people having raves out in wilderness and taking ecstasy and falling off of rocks and dying. I have, high speed, vehicle chases that go through the park where someone will be catapulted out of their vehicle. A variety of different things that happen inside the park. Luckily, I've worked in a lot of different parks. Grand Canyon was a great training area. We had 10 to 20 deaths a year there with lots and lots of injuries that gave me good training. I went to EMT school. Actually, I've been to EMT school 3 times because I keep on letting it lapse and having to go back again. My spouse is a paramedic. Inside of a national park, about 10-20% of our staff they're all EMTs. With Jamie's crew, he sends them all to the wilderness first aid classes so that when they're in the backcountry, they can figure things out. It's a super big responsibility and worry for me, Lyle, because I've had to sit with the parents or spouses of people that have died. I've had to search with the parents looking for bodies inside the park before. And I take it super, super seriously. And whenever we have someone that dies in the park, I try to learn from that experience. Just like when you blow it on an exam, which you probably never do, Lyle, because you strike me as a very smart kid. But hopefully you learn from those mistakes that you made and you don't blow it the next time you take that exam. The same is true when someone dies inside of a park. We have an after-action review. We all sit down. Sometimes we'll bring in a facilitator to have that discussion and see how can we do things differently to make sure that this doesn't happen again. Hopefully that dealt with some of your question, Lyle. If not, okay. Any other questions?
I can go next. So Mr. Nelson has showed us like a map of the land that's covered by the Bureau of Land Management. And I noticed that a lot of that is where like most solar farms are being targeted to go. How is that debate happening over like introducing solar farms to area that's typically wilderness? And then how do you feel about that?
Super, super good question. Well, it really hits home here at this park as well, because Joshua Tree is surrounded by BLM. We have large solar farms all around the park. And, a lot of my coworkers and subordinates, they're like freaking out. They're like, this poses a significant threat to the park. It can affect wildlife corridors for animals that are like bighorn sheep and mule deer and other species of concern. It's an eyesore if you're in wilderness and you see this big flashy bunch of glass that's out there in the desert. It kind of changes your experience there. It removes the crust off the desert floor, which can cause dust issues and other things. So it's a big impact to the land. At the exact same time, I'm dealing with the effects of global climate change in this park. I'm watching the Joshua trees at lower elevations die out. I've seen the fire regime change in the last 40 years inside this park, so that a park that never had fire before, we have fires every year here right now. And all these things are related to climate change. So I am, when it's appropriate, I think it's very, very useful to place solar farms and wind farms on public land, provided, it's not a wilderness area, because if it's a wilderness area, we are prohibited from doing any sort of construction. The president can step in, Congress could step in and say it's in the national interest, we have to do this. And that's happened many times in the history of this country. A big chunk of Joshua Tree was carved out right after the war so that Kaiser Steel could get more steel to rebuild the fleet after World War II. There were chunks up in, I want to say Mount Rainier, where they took out huge spruce forests from inside the national park. which has the highest level of protection in the United States, in order to make gliders during World War II. There are times when we have to make really, really tough decisions, and maybe global climate change. I mean, the world when you guys are in your 60s and 70s is not going to look the same way it looks today. You know, we are seeing the effects of that in California right now. Today, I was listening to the news. There are over 400 different fires burning in the state right now.
David, you're frozen. Okay, well, does anybody have a question for Jamie here about anything about trails while David gets his internet back?
So how do you go about one of those internships?
That's a really good question. Is it Braden? So yeah, you know, there's a couple of different ways to go about getting an internship with the National Park Service. You know, we have a youth corps here at Joshua Tree in the summer. I would only recommend applying if you really, really like the desert, because it is definitely hot here. You know, we have our youth corps from like June and July. And you can go on our website to request an application for that. We generally start requesting applications in March or April. And it's about an 8-week program. But we are definitely not the only national park that has a youth corps program. There's multiple national parks: Rocky Mountain National Park, Yosemite, Yellowstone, Grand Teton. There's multiple national parks that have youth corps programs. And so most of those parks, you can go directly to their individual websites to find application for youth corps. You know, and youth corps is restricted to folks of high school age. So if that's something you like to pursue during your summers in high school, that would be a great way to go. If you're looking a little bit into the future after you graduate from high school, there's some really interesting organizations that you can apply for summer internships. One that's very well known is called SCA, the Student Conservation Association. They have a very well developed website, so you can find out how to apply for their program there. And I'll have to put in a plug also for a state-based conservation corps here in California. It's called the CCC, the California Conservation Corps. They take folks that are, you know, a little bit older than high school age on until about mid-20s, late 20s. And you can gain a lot of experience with the CCC. That you don't have to be a California resident to apply. But obviously, if you accepted a job or an internship with them, you would have to move here. There's certain programs that do provide housing. So that could be something that would be a possibility. But also, if you're in the CCC for more than 1 year, they could invite you into what is called their backcountry trail program. And in that program, you would be invited to live and work in a place like Yosemite for up to 2 months at a time. And you would be camping out for work, and definitely in a wilderness area, pretty far from anything that's developed, and primarily doing trail maintenance projects. So those are a couple of the things that come to mind for internships.
Jamie, thanks for taking over. I'm sorry that I got kicked off. It's the federal government, you know, it's falling apart. Does anyone else have a question?
A quick question. It's not very specific, but I guess I'm interested in like how, like, what your wildlife is like, how you protect the wildlife from the people, and like how you protect people from like the dangerous wildlife.
So one of the cool things about national parks is that there are there's no fences or guardrails or things like that. You can die in a national park, and there's really nothing that we as the government are going to do to stop you from making poor decisions. We're going to try to educate you as much as possible, And, you know, in situations where other people could be hurt, we may actually create regulations. So for example, you know, you can't feed wildlife. If you feed a grizzly bear, you know, that grizzly bear is going to get acclimated to humans feeding them, which probably will lead to that grizzly bear having to be killed because he will become a hostile animal in that case. Grand Canyon does not have railing along the side of it for 99.9% of it. If you want to get close to the edge and have that experience, awesome, but you just may fall to your death. So it's a tough one. We try to educate, and Jamie knows this because all of our trails right now, we are just heavily hitting with warnings about hiking in the heat, you know, hiking in the mornings and in the evenings, don't hike in the middle of the day. You know, all these messages right now to warn people, but we're not closing off our trails. You know, it's up to you to make those decisions because you're smart. You know, Sophia, you're an intelligent young woman who should be able to make those decisions. A little bit of education helps because I don't expect you to know all the rattlesnake species that are here. So I might want to warn you that when you're hiking in Rattlesnake Canyon, you may come across a lot of rattlesnakes. So please don't play with them. But usually it's only males between the ages of 16 and 24 that play with rattlesnakes. So I think you're fine. So it's a tough balance all the time to figure out. We don't want to be fascists. We don't want to like, you know, like, these are all the rules. You cannot do this, and this, because it is your park. You own it, Sophia. You know, you don't even have a job. Well, maybe you do have a job. Your job is being a student. You're not paying a lot in taxes right now, but you own about 420 national parks across the United States. You own all the national forests. You own all the BLM properties. That's what public land is. And we want you to enjoy those things. And if you want to have that experience, like during the middle of COVID, I had to get out of here. I went up to the Coxcomb Mountains in the northeastern corner of the park, and I went hiking for 3 days by myself. I was hiking like 30 miles a day. I ran out of water. You know, I probably should have died while I was there, but that was my right to do that. And I did it, and I should have known better. I should have had more water. I should have looked at a map better, but that's the point. So it is almost 10 o'clock and I have actually got to get on a call with our budget analyst. Because of COVID, this park is about $3 million low on revenue this year, which probably means nothing to you guys, but I am scrambling to figure out a way to pay the bills so we don't have to lay off all of our employees, and Jamie can actually have a staff next year of trail workers. Otherwise it's going to be Jamie doing that. He's getting old. So I'm not sure. So Eric, I give you my staff. You know, I've got some other personalities that we talked about that I think would be useful for your classes coming up. Please feel free to use me. Students, please feel free to reach out to me if you do have questions about the agency or anything else. Jamie and I are here to help you.
You know, David, thanks again very much. We'll just keep this meeting going for a little bit, and maybe we can pepper Jamie with some questions if we need to here. But
you,
David, I'm sure that every kid here really appreciates your time and the work that you do. I wanted to ask, I won't do it, but during the governmental shutdown, I know you did some heroic things to keep that park operating, and I know it's a different story for a different time. But once again, thanks for everything you do, and maybe there'll be a day when one of these kids would visit you in person in California.
I look forward to seeing them. And actually, we probably could do a session just on the politics of being a civil servant in the situation. Yeah. And I think that would be useful for the kids. But all of you take care. Have a great day. Jamie, thank you for filling in.
All right, Dave. Take care.
Bye.
All right. All right. All right. So does anybody have any questions for Jamie?
Sure.
I mean, I do if you don't, but fire away, Lyle, go ahead.
So I've helped build trails in super lush areas, but I'd imagine that the process is different in an arid place. Like, how do you guys maintain trails? How do you build them?
That's a good question. Yeah, you know, every place is different. And definitely building trails at Joshua Tree is different than any other place I've ever worked. I've worked in desert environments, particularly I've worked at Saguaro National Park in southern Arizona and the Sonoran Desert. But if you've apologized for my phone just going crazy. Yeah, I mean, if you've ever been to the Sonoran Desert, it's actually quite lush. There's pretty big mesquite trees and Palo Verde trees. There's lots of cactus. There's lots of other bushes and shrubs growing. Joshua Tree is about as dry a desert as we have in the United States, the Mojave Desert. And so that makes things difficult because honestly, a lot of our trails go through we call them washes. I mean, they're basically creeks with no water. You know, it's like when it does rain, and it does on occasion here, it rains, usually floods. You know, those areas will have running water, but that's pretty infrequent. And so a lot of our trails will actually use those dry riverbeds as connection points. But because there's not a lot of vegetation, sometimes it's hard to tell like what's the dry wash and what is, you know, the trail. So because the trail will enter and exit a wash. What we'll do is we'll use small, maybe, you know, kind of cantaloupe sized rocks that we can find to set along the edges of the trail. We call it delineation, just to make sure that it's kind of clear where the path is going. We do that. That's pretty a low impact way of making sure people know where the trail is. But there's also, you know, we've started to install like quite a few signs because of some of the reasons that David kind of went over. We have unfortunately had, I've been at this park a little bit over 5 years, and unfortunately in that time we've had at least half a dozen people that have passed away due to getting lost on the trail. Some reason people want to go hiking in the middle of the summer, and they're not acclimated. They aren't necessarily able to orient themselves. They don't know how to use a map, don't think that they should bring a map or a compass, and they go out and they get lost. And you know, they run out of water, and you know, bad things happen. So due to the severity of that problem, and only because of that, we've started to install quite a few more signs. So they're very, very small, just arrows. I mean, they're probably about, you know, 4 inches wide by 6 inches tall on a metal post. And it's just a reassurance marker, kind of letting people know that they're, you know, on the right route so that they don't, you know, wander off. But aside from that, you know, really one of the main things to think about with trails is drainage. There's, you know, trails are basically small roads. I mean, you kind of have to engineer them to make sure that water goes off of the trail, because if not, after a few years, particularly if the trail is open to horse traffic, you end up with a big ditch. I mean, sometimes, you know, it can be knee high or waist high. And that's one, that's not very much fun to hike on. And then two, it just concentrates erosion, and it's only going to continuously get worse. And so what we do is we focus on building drainage, and we use local materials as much as possible. Here in Joshua Tree, that means our rocks. So we will take, you know, mid-sized boulders, and we'll actually drill into those rocks to split them into smaller sections. We'll do that by hand many times, and then we'll use those rock pieces to actually use a technique called dry stone masonry, which, if I'm not mistaken, there may be some dry stone masonry on farms around Kansas. And so it's a similar, you know, it's the same technique. It's very long lasting. And if you use the technique correctly, those structures can be there for a very long time. So that's, I don't know, a long-winded answer to your question, I guess.
Yeah, there are a lot of dry stone walls in the Flint Hills, particularly. They're very, very beautiful, and the amount of work that goes into building those is amazing. But they last for, you know, 100 years, a lot of them. Any other questions? So, Jamie, how much horse travel is in Joshua Tree? I don't think of Joshua Tree. I visited it as well, and I don't think of it as big horse country, but in the wintertime, do you guys get quite a few horses in the park?
You know, that's a good question. We have, so out of the 230 miles or so of trail that we maintain in the park, about 60 of those miles of trail are open to equestrians. The horse traffic that we have, as far as I can tell, generally are more local folks. People that live nearby, they'll drive in. We have a couple of places that are big enough to accommodate horse trailers, and they'll just go in for day rides. Obviously, water is a significant issue here in the park. There's absolutely no running water, you know, to help support a pack trip overnight. So people will generally, there are 2 equestrian campgrounds in the park that people can then use as a base, a home base to go and explore the park on horseback. There is one trail that's about 30 miles long. It makes kind of a big horseshoe through the main part of the park in the northern area, and it's called the California Riding and Hiking Trail. And the riding is not for mountain bikes, it's actually for equestrians. And that's a trail that was developed, one of the earlier developed trails in the park that was back in the 1960s. So, yeah, so there's not a ton. You're absolutely right. I mean, we definitely have equestrian users, but they're a minority. Most of our users are hikers.
I'm full of questions. Kids,
That's okay.
Anybody? I mean, I just want to keep you. We got about 5 minutes left or so. What's your college education? I assume that you have did you go to college and did you study anything related to what you do? How did you get into it?
Sure, by accident. Yeah. Yeah, you know, just very briefly about me. So I grew up in South Carolina, a very rural area of South Carolina, Saluda. So I grew up on my granddad's hog farm. And after I graduated high school, I did go to a local community liberal arts college that I studied biology. I got my undergraduate degree there, a small school called Presbyterian College. And then after that, you know, I had my eyes set on moving somewhere else. And basically, I packed my bags and I moved to Colorado. I ended up in Boulder, primarily because I ran out of money, and that's where I ended up. And so I spent several years in Colorado, in Boulder, working for what was then called the Mountain Parks District of the city of Boulder. So I worked for the municipal park system as a trail maintenance worker. That was my first job, working trails back in 1998. So I worked for them for about 3 years. And then I thought, well, you know, it's a city park. There's not that much room to move up. Boulder is, you know, an extremely expensive place to live. And so I was looking for other things to do with my life. And so I thought, well, I either need to take advantage of this great university in the town that I'm living in, or I need to move. And so I applied for a master's program in journalism, specifically focused on environmental and science writing. And luckily I was accepted into that program. And so I ended up staying in Boulder for a few more years to finish my master's degree. So after that, you know, I did end up working as a newspaper reporter for several years. And then I realized that I had gone to school for a master's degree for possibly one of the lowest paying professions possible.
Hey, James, I have to interrupt. I kind of goofed on the clock here. I'm a new teacher.
Oh.
I've only been in the game since 2000. Just kidding.
Yeah.
No, I goofed the time. I've kept these guys a little bit too long. I love what you're saying.
Okay.
And
yeah.
I wanted to, I kind of have to close it up. Kids, listen, I really appreciate your attention today. Jamie, it's a fascinating thing that you do, making trails. It's near and dear to me. So if I have your contact info, maybe you stay on and send that to me. And I'd like to have that just so I can touch base with you. You guys, students, thanks a lot for hanging in there. I'm sorry I kept you a little bit late, but that's about all I have. Thanks everybody, and have a good rest of the day. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And thanks everyone.
you.
Have a great day, huh?
Thank you so much.
Yeah, sorry about that, guys. I goofed on that. I'm looking at my clock going, wait a second. This was supposed to be over, but oh well, they stuck in there. So hey, you boys that are still here, if you want to talk to him, have at it. You know, ask him anything you want.
Well, I can't really think of anything, honestly. I was more here to ask about fishing at the dam again.
Okay. All right. So I'll go ahead. Jamie, I'm
The
gonna
important stuff.
And yeah, these two guys, we took them, or I met them at 6 a.m. this morning in the dark down at the Kansas River. If you've ever driven I-70, you know, it crosses over the Kansas River. It's a big muddy Midwestern river, and the fishing can be very exciting, you know, with the invasive carp in there. But
Sure.
anyway, but so I'll let you go. Hey, listen, thanks a lot.
Thanks for everything.
I might hit you up for a summer job. You know, that's kind of what I want to do. You know,
Come on out. Yeah.
My youngest kid is now a sophomore in high school, and boy, as soon as she hits, you know, a couple more years of teaching, then I'm going to be looking for other. I love making trails. I think it's a lot of imagination, and I have a lot of funny stories about it in Winter Park, where we'd go out in the woods and it's like, well, you know, hey, let's make it go here. Let's switch this back. And so I appreciate what you do there. And thanks so much for your time. And I really appreciate it. I'll send my info to David, and maybe I can touch base with you at some point.
Sure. That sounds great.
Okay.
Yep.
Hey, thanks a lot.
Nice
Have
to
a
meet
good
you
one.
all. Take care.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Okay.
So
Howdy.
it sounds like we had fun this morning.
Good. That's great. I had fun too, so I'm in. You know, as far as when and how to do that some more, I told you that the issue with our community, it's a rough crowd down there. The catfishing community is rough. It's hard to walk past them, as I said, and go through that gate. The ladder system on the south side is, it's you guys are very adept, you know. I mean, you could go down that, but I'm gonna say that. What was that? That was weird.
That was my.
I'm gonna say that the ladder trying to get down onto the apron on the south side, that's where it's really private and fun fishing. You know, I've had kids down there with our ladder gone. I don't know though. So I'm assuming you would like to go fishing again, sort of. Is that?
Always down.
Okay. Well, why don't we do this? I think that what I'd like to do as the teacher of this class is to get commitments from like 3 other kids, and if we can get Lyle to go back down, maybe, you know, I want to have you guys help show other kids how, you know, what it's all about down there. You prove that you can be safe. Obviously, you got to pay attention to what's going on down there, and I'm convinced that you guys would be fine doing that. So let me just say, fundamentally, I am an early riser. I ride my bike at that time of day, and if I can get enough workout stuff in the afternoons, I'd fish any day. And so, you know, as far as like tomorrow, no, maybe, you know, what's tomorrow, Friday? What's today? It's Thursday. You know, like on our class days, I'm happy to meet you, you know, whatever day, really. Doesn't matter to me. I mean, I don't know. I think the morning's going to have to be the time, though.
Yeah, that worked real well, I think.
What about this? what I could commit to on Wednesdays, we don't really have the official. I mean, I don't think there's any doubt. Like here, I rushed to this morning meeting. If you were in the morning meeting today, I mean, that's an absolute, like, there's no reason to rush for that because nothing is really happening during that. I mean, if any news happens, then we're going to get it elsewhere. So I will go ahead and commit to you that on Wednesday mornings, I'm willing to fish.
Okay.
Yeah, because Wednesdays we usually are pretty light on classes.
Yeah, you have no classes and you have office hours, and I don't know, you have to go do whatever you got to do. So that works. In the meantime, maybe you talk to your classmates and say, hey, Mr. Nelson wants me to teach someone or be in charge of a kid and take him down there because I have to let it grow kind of exponentially. I want to get, you guys can fish, or help other kids. It's really fun to help other kids catch stuff. Certainly. So for the immediate, we're going to paddle next week on Thursday. Next week on Wednesday is our fishing day.
Okay.
Okay.
Sounds good.
And then on a personal note, if I go, I might buzz you guys or at least throw it out there. Because now that I have a little bit of motivation to get my own gear together, and it is fun. And one of the things that I want to do is I want to have a catfish fry. So Lakeview, a nighttime Lakeview thing is fun. The bugs are kind of bad, but especially if you can fight off the bugs and maybe even get out into the lake in the night, the catfish are really active there. And I think that what I want to do is have catch a bunch of catfish and then clean them up and eat them and show kids how to do that. So that's where I'm at.
Well, I know Braden and I are both we know how to do that.
Well,
we fry fish all the time.
Right. So. I mean, I need instruction, frankly, on that. And I don't know how much, you guys have clean cats. I have an electric knife, and it takes some learning because they're so tough, or they're so, like, if you don't have a really big fish, it's hard to get them filleted out really well.
I find keeping like when you flip over the fillet, cutting off the skin. I find that step to be a little tricky sometimes.
Oh, it's totally tricky. They're so slimy and they're pulling through your hand. And so, yeah, I totally agree.
You have to have for sure.
Well, Lyle's a member at Lakeview. There's no secret about that. And I'm a member. So I plan on, I think using that. So, okay. So Wednesday morning, we'll talk next week, but Wednesday morning, let's fish the dam.
Okay.
And Thursday is our paddle day at Lakeview. That scheduled time is 2 to 4. But I did it on Thursday because Lakeview is like a ghost town on Thursdays usually. And we can, maybe we have some catfish rigs there and throw them in and see what happens that evening. Try to collect up some catfish, but keep pushing. I think I'm a type of guy that needs to have constant, motivation to go, and really, aside from riding my bike, and keeping after my family or whatever, I'm free. So I'd fish. I like it, and you guys are into it. So I want to try to enable you. So there you go. What's today? Thursday. So our next time, watch for a message on the group me. If I get a wild hair, I'll throw it out there, and if I can rig something up on the south side, I'll try to do that. But you got to be an acrobat to get down onto that apron, man. I mean, it's scary. It's all slimy and whatever, and so you put a ladder down on algae. It's not an ideal situation,
Right.
So anyway. All right. Well, that was fun this morning, and that video is on the school's social media, just so you know.
I saw that. Yeah.
So you're going to be famous. but that's a small carp, man. I mean, I'm telling you,
Really?
they're just monster. I've caught a
That one Braden had that
Yeah.
he got away. That was big.
I think that may have been a catfish, is what I think.
I think it might have been too. I think there's part of me that thinks that was like a big old flathead.
Yeah,
That was big fish.
the cats go under and into the structure, and the carp run out. I've always seen that. So I think that was a cat, and I think if that drag was set a little differently, that we're looking at a 30-pound flathead.
Yeah.
So next time we go, I think we have to work on having some live bait, because the flatheads are the trophies. I mean,
we can get live bait if we have more preparation.
yeah, I think that's going to be that'll be the key. Live bait and a little more time, when you can just sit in there. I wish I had an easy answer, because I've seen people get really nasty when you get private access and they don't have it.
Yeah.
Well, we went to the sandbar one time and we paddled through, and these guys were fishing on the bank, and I don't know if we made them mad or something, but they left all of their trash on the back of Braden's truck and stuff, and just not right to do.
Yeah, that unfortunately that there's a lot of that in Kansas that you deal with, and I've dealt with people for years. I worked at Bowersock, so it's rough. And I don't know what the answer is, but whatever you guys can do. I mean, I think it's a really worthwhile to try to get some of the kids in this class that don't know anything about it down there. So, but anyway, let's just take it a day at a time. Watch the group me, and if I can get out this weekend, if I think there's a good time, then I'll just throw something out there. And but Wednesday next week in the morning, Thursday night catfish. Deal?
Sounds good.
Okay, cool. All right, guys, I'll let you go. We'll be in touch.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Sounds good.
All right, guys, take care.